A very good evening to all our viewers today. Today we have with us a very seasoned professional who has worked in engineering, entrepreneurship, and extensively in biodiversity. He is presently the director and shareholder of the Tata Boat Charter Company, a consultant to nature attraction, the director and owner of a vacation rental home in the touristic zone of Rum Point, Grand Cayman. In all these roles, his overarching objective is sustainability. He regards fiscal responsibility and ESG as essential factors in shaping society. Let us all welcome Mr. Timothy Allen. Hi Timothy, how are you doing?
Oh, good morning, Harsha. I'm honored to be invited to present in this series of the live interactions with global change makers. And, I've been delighted to learn about the International Institute of Corporate Sustainability and Responsibility, or ICSR. Important mission you have to basically enable your lifetime learners to gain knowledge and experience and skills in sustainability and responsible business practices. So today I hope we'll engage in a really informative and interactive period of time focusing on exactly that sustainability and responsible business practices.
Yes, so you have a very interesting journey. Are you one of the most experienced professionals on the bench who work with engineers and the CEO of leading companies in consulting on Sea Solar Power IMC and forayed into renewable energy and sustainability? What led to that shift? What was the reason?
My initial professional credentials are as a professional electrical engineer, and I'm still a fellow of the UK based Institute of Engineering and Technology. My career focus in engineering was mainly on low power aspects of electrical engineering. In other words, what's referred to as signals rather than power. However, in that job, I also got involved in maintaining and operating large backup generators and power systems for our national and international telecom stations, as well as technical knowledge and experience required to coordinate telecom cabling and distribution systems with mains electricity transmission and distribution systems. So I'm also familiar with key principles of utility scale electricity power generation and transmission and distribution and the need to transition to more sustainable prime sources of that power. So for 35 years I worked in telecom from 1973 to 2008, and the first 23 years, in other words, about a quarter of a century, were primarily working in various engineering and engineering management roles. After that, then I moved into top management at CEO level of the telecom company in two different Caribbean island nations, where we provided all of the national and international telecoms of those nations, phone systems, telegram, telex, data, eventually internet access, mobile, international link, satellite systems, submarine cable systems, all those things. So in about 2010, because of my credentials and experience in electrical engineering, through a personal contact, I became an ad hoc consultant to Sea Solar Power Incorporated. That's a company focused on design and development of components of a technology called OTEC, Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion. Now, this is a very promising, very realistic method of using the heat that is collected from solar radiation in the top layers of the sea, of the ocean. So up and near the surface of the tropical seas and oceans, they get quite warm in the tropical regions. And using that power, we can generate renewable electrical energy continuously, steadily, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without the problems of intermittency of solar photovoltaic systems, for example, or wind farms. And OTEC uses a very well known, very well used thermodynamic process. It's known as a Rankine cycle. It's been demonstrated in practice. For example, a demonstration plant was built and has been operating in Hawaii since 2015. OTEC is really a very exciting prospect for the tropical nations with that have access to deep water nearby. It's a source of truly green, truly renewable, truly holistically sustainable electric power production. It's suitable for what we call base load requirements. That means, the constant load that a power utility has to supply. Now, because its output is from the heat in the oceans, it's reliable and it's constant because tropical ocean temperatures stay within a relatively narrow range, despite whether it's day or night, whether it's cloudy or bright, whether it's summer or winter. And so there's an abundant supply of the fuel, enough to serve many, many times, in fact, hundreds of times, the electrical energy demands of our increasingly developed world is stored in that heat, in the top layers of the ocean. So the main need now to bring OTEC to full impact on green energy is really investment of funds, because the main cost of OTEC is the capital cost of building this large-scale hardware to pump large volumes of seawater to generate large amounts of electricity. And some of the additional valuable products from OTEC plants could be things like green hydrogen and also fresh water converted from seawater. So I know we don't have much time to get into huge detail about OTEC today, but I would very much encourage you and all of our listeners to get more familiar with this technology, because I think it can be a major factor in transitioning to green energy, especially in developing nations of the world that are adjacent to these tropical oceans.
That's a very interesting fact and a very interesting thesis. Um, so, uh, in the same year, yeah, would you like to share a little bit more on how do you really implement this technology, and has there are there any predecessors who have already done this kind of project which could be replicated in the emerging countries?
Well, very quickly, I can tell you that for this slide I'm showing this cycle. I don't know if you can see the slide right now. The cycle is a well-known cycle, and the fact of OTEC working, as I say, has been proven. That plant in Hawaii is one really good example. Now what it takes is investment to build large scale. We're talking maybe 100 megawatt or at least 20 megawatt plants. Um, and the concept actually is of how to build a plant is fairly straightforward. As you'll see in this slide, there is a floating system that contains the generator, the turbine, the pumps. There, you need a very deep pipe. You're talking about a kilometer deep of water, because down there you're getting near to freezing temperatures. Water has this unique quality that as it goes below about 4 degrees centigrade, it becomes lighter, so it begins to float up. But you do have water down there that is as near 4 degrees centigrade, and that is used on the cooling side of the thermodynamic cycle. And then the water here at the surface is a lot warmer, and that is used for the heating side, the boiler. So you have heat in from the warm sea surface temperatures, the warm sea surface water, lots and lots of it, and then you have cooling through the pumping of this water from that deep water pipe that comes up, water, as I say, about a kilometer deep, that's very cold, and that condenses the fluid that has been boiled by that heat, and it condenses it back to liquid. And you have high pressure gas when it boils, and here in the condenser you have low pressure, because you're condensing it back to liquid because of the cooling. As I say, I don't think we have enough time to really go in depth and do it justice. Maybe that's something we should consider for another session, because OTEC is very promising, but you really need to
Yes.
be where the water is warm. You need to be somewhere, where you have, as you see in these zones here, the bigger the temperature differential. That's what this chart is actually showing, is a differential between sea surface temperature and the deep water temperature. And that's what you need. And so it's really applicable largely within the tropical zones.
Indeed, it's very inspirational and to see this kind of work, and I'm sure that we can replicate it all over the world, especially considering there is a lot of shortage of energy of one kind, and we are all moving towards sustainable and green energy. So this is a time that most of the people should work towards, and the government should work towards adapting the same. So moving on from this year, in the year 2010, you also initiated your work at the Cayman Turtle Center. What was the motivation and mission behind that?
Well, I must say that first I should explain. So I was in telecom for 35 years. And then the telecom company I worked for, it was a large international corporation. They made a significant change to the way that it was structured in 2008. So I accepted an early retirement offer and I transitioned then out of telecom. Now, some years before that, I had had a bit of an experience, an initial taste of operating in the tourism industry by owning and renting a two-bedroom beach house that my wife and I had purchased. I licensed it for tourist rentals to generate income during periods when we weren't using it. And then in 2008, I had the opportunity to assist my eldest son. And that was in a company where we were creating a, a tour company. It was going to offer land tours that were going to be cultural and historical land tours. And that company was called Cayman Safari Adventures. That was a very exciting time for me because that's when I really got deeper and deeper into tourism. I helped with the product development. I prepared the standard operating procedures, what we know as SOPs. Also did the historical and cultural research to create the scripts for each of the tour guides and drivers. Then assisted in recruiting and in training the drivers and guides. And Cayman Safari Adventures has been excellent from the time it started up. It got excellent reviews on TripAdvisor. And after several years of winning their certificate of excellence, it was awarded the status of Hall of Fame. So that really enabled me to dive deep into tourism, into that side of it, the aspects of attractions, of tours, and gave me increasing knowledge and understanding of the tourism industry. Basically, it both challenged me and it fed my appetite to be a continuous learner in tourism matters. So in late 2009, I responded to an ad of a vacancy for the position of what was then called General Manager of the Cayman Turtle Farm. And the job eventually became more appropriate, the title CEO, Chief Executive Officer. And that company is now named the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center, which is really a much better description of its primary purpose and its mission. So that's really how I got started in that. Now, although sea turtle conservation is at its heart, the source of about 90% of the center's revenues is its commercial functions, as Cayman's most visited land-based tourist attraction, typically receiving over 250,000 guests every year. Now, those guests comprise both cruise visitors as well as stayover visitors who arrive on the island by air. The tourist attraction income comes from providing tours to the center, as well as tours to other attractions on the island, some of them are combination tours. And also revenues through the sale of retail merchandise, mainly souvenirs and giftware in our shops on site, and also food and beverage operations at several outlets on the site. So as you can imagine, for me, this was a huge change in the technical aspects of my job responsibilities. So by the time I took up the post, I'd been CEO of telecom companies in 2 different countries. I was quite comfortable with the aspects of corporate leadership and management functions. My background, as I mentioned, was in engineering, and that has a foundation in science. That foundation, for me and my academic pursuits in regard to pursuing engineering involving science, was very helpful to me because it really took a steep learning curve for me to understand the science and technologies behind the Turtle Center's mission, and both the biological aspects as well as important logistical aspects of this work because it takes quite a bit of also engineering in order to conduct captive breeding and releasing sea turtles to repopulate the wild. And as CEO, I'd already been in the process of getting a progressively better and better and better understanding and a keen interest in sustainability. And if you like, I'd like to chat a little bit about that now because these are the essential factors we now refer to collectively as ESG. And as you know, that's a framework that helps their stakeholders of an organization understand how is that organization managing its risks and its opportunities related to environmental and social and governance criteria. So, in my role as the CEO of the Turtle Center, um, I think you see in these three vital pillars of sustainability that we call ESG, these things came into very sharp focus. I've made some notes on the slide as to aspects of each of those three pillars that really pertain to the work and the operations of Cayman Turtle Center. So environmental issues such as conservation and biodiversity, important ecological roles of various threatened species, biological issues and environmental issues such as biohazards, pathogens and so on, climate change, natural disaster hazards, pollution, and particularly ocean plastic. And then social issues. The center has very important national socio-economic impacts. Also, and I'll talk a little bit more about the development of human capital. Also, social issues involve fair employment conditions. Excuse me, fair employment conditions and schemes to recognize and reward and positively reinforce the employees. And also the employment and development of local people in a nation in which expatriates comprise nearly half of the workforce. And then the governance issues, the G in ESG, that's matters such as compliance with laws and regulations, ethical practices, fiscal disciplines, standard operating procedures, protocols, business controls, record keeping, employee relations, all these things, fiduciary duties to the company and in turn to shareholders. So those different matters have really driven not only me as a CEO and in companies in general, it seems ESG, while it's most often visibly mentioned in the context of financing and investing, there are many stakeholders who are impacted by it and are keenly interested in ESG matters. For example, directors of the institutions, employees, customers, suppliers, regulators, industry partners, all of these different categories of people and institutions. They should be, and they are increasingly interested in the degree of sustainability and the ethical standards of the company's mission, of its business model, and of the way that its operations impact upon the society and environment.
Um, when we look at this aspect, how do you see that we can ensure ESG as a pillar for also sustainable tourism, considering that you are leading in the industry as a CEO for a tourism company too, and it's one of the top-notch companies in the world. So how do you really implement the ESG pillars in your company?
So perhaps I could give some examples of during the period I was there as CEO at the Cayman Turtle Center for 12 years, between January 2010 to January 2022 when I retired. The company, when I started in the position back in 2010, ESG really wasn't an acronym that was spoken about in any great detail here. Although the reality of those same features, factors, and importance of it has existed for a long time and has even begun to be recognized. But nevertheless, from my education, my experience in engineering, my learning, my practice in senior management, and of course having been for some 12 years CEO in private sector companies, which by the way were each a subsidiary of a publicly held company that was publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange. During that time, I'd seen and learned firsthand the reality of the vital importance and necessity of these three pillars that we talk about today as ESG: environmental, social, and governance. I'm going to do this in a bit of a reverse order, if I may, Arsha. And first of all, talk briefly about what we did to improve governance. That's the G pillar in ESG. Frankly, when I took the job to lead the company, which is 100% government owned, I realized that there was a lot of work to do to improve the Turtle Centre's business controls and its compliance with timely financial reporting requirements. The chief financial officer of the company had resigned a few months before I was recruited. Audits were backlogged for about 2 years, and each year's audits contained 2 and sometimes more qualifications. They weren't clean audits. And shortly after I started at the Turtle Centre, I then hired a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, who had worked as an auditor for a large accounting firm. And together we worked really steadily, very deliberately, over time, to eventually get to where the company was getting clean, unqualified audits, completed and presented to the shareholder within the statutory timeframes. Now, let's turn to social factors, the S in ESG. They involve the company's relationship within the society, the community in which it operates. I realized that the local news media, the general public, and even many of the employees didn't understand very well as to what really was the Turtle Centre's main purposes and mission. And working together with the board of directors at various points, we changed the company's name and its branding. So first of all, we changed the company's branding. It had been using a brand called Bosun's Beach, largely in its relationship with the tourist attraction side of it, because it really is a theme park for that aspect of it. But the name Bosun's Beach caused a lot of confusion about the nature of the company's tourist attraction and really what its purposes was. So we changed the name at that time simply to Cayman Turtle Farm. That more closely matched the registered company name at that time. Let me talk in a little bit of depth about the social factor that is the development of local people. That is a really important and particularly urgent need in Cayman society. In the Cayman Islands, the fall 2020 Labour Force Survey report indicates that 48.4% of Caymanians are what comprise the workforce here in Cayman. In other words, slightly less than half of the workers here are Caymanian. In addition to that, there are another 8.1% who are people closely connected to Caymanians or to the island in one way or another, and they have been granted permanent residence with the right to work. So the remaining 43.6% of workers here are non-Caymanians. In other words, almost half. So in addition to working on other aspects, we worked hard to get our employee base more and more Caymanian. By the time I retired, early this year in January 2022, we had less than 5% of our employees on work permits in a country in which, as I said, typically 43.6% of employees are non-Caymanian. A major achievement. Had to be very determined about it, but we understood the role of the company in the social factor, that S in ESG. Part of it is giving opportunities and development to local people. But in addition to that, in addition to the people side, we made huge strides in improving and upgrading the standards of care and welfare of the animals in our collection. We really invested heavily in this. We hired 2 veterinarians with specialization in wild animal health and with experience in working with a diverse range of exotic species. We greatly improved the husbandry practices, and also we improved the interactions between our guests and our animals to ensure that we protected the safety of the animals as well as the safety of the people interacting with them. But then we realized, though, that the name farm was distracting from the primary objective of the company, which is doing turtle conservation, and it's educating tourists and residents about turtle conservation. In other words, a strong focus on protecting the marine ecosystem, the environmental factors, the E in ESG. Therefore, it was necessary to change the company's memorandum of association to clearly emphasize the center's conservation purpose and its conservation mission. So we changed its registered name to Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center Limited to better represent its primary objective. We also changed its branding from Cayman Turtle Farm to Cayman Turtle Center, again, so as to better represent the company's purpose. Now, I should mention something very interesting. Turtle meat production and sale produces only a small fraction, typically less than 10% of the company's revenues. Now, those come from an entire closed cycle process. We don't take any animals or eggs from the wild because that was done only to set up the company and its breeding stock back in the early 1970s. So all of this turtle meat production and sale is done within a closed cycle, within a farming environment, where we produce eggs that grow into turtles. And some of those are harvested, and of course some of them are released into the wild. But that production and sale of turtle meat in the Cayman context is a vital part of fulfilling the company's sea turtle conservation mission because it provides a reliable and an affordable supply of farm sea turtle meat to the local market only. And now it's done at a heavily subsidized price in order that it removes the stimulus for poaching. And by doing that, we diminish incentives not only for the poachers, but for people to buy it from a poacher because they can buy it legally from Cayman Turtle Center at as I say, a very affordable and subsidized price. Because of that, we reduce the risk of poaching turtles from the wild to meet the local demand. And that, what I just talked about, that imperative is supported by the science, supported by facts, figures, in a rigorous Darwin Plus funded study on the socioeconomics of turtle conservation in Cayman Islands that began in 2014 and went on for another 2 or 3 years. And it was subsequently it has been published. However, because for many years the price of that had been over-subsidized, it was too low. When I joined the company in 2010, it was really unsustainable because by that time the farming operation couldn't keep up with the growing local demand for turtle meat. And I know many of our listeners and the people participating today are people who are studying economics or have a lot of expertise in economics. And let me just tell you, for a commodity like meat, the PQ or the price demand curve is a very real thing. So under my direction, the company increased the pricing of farm-raised sea turtle meat products to modulate the demand somewhat. And we subsequently adjusted those prices based on what we learned of the price elasticity of demand for the product. So it would make the production of the quantity demanded for the product much more realistic to be within the capabilities of our finite farming resources because we only have so much space to farm, so we can only accommodate so many turtles, so we can only produce so much of the turtle meat products. But still, we're greatly suppressing the incentives for poachers to take turtles from the wild. But we also made huge improvements, as I mentioned, in animal welfare and animal care. When I started in my post as CEO, there was no in-house veterinarian, and there was only very occasional veterinary care that was kind of provided ad hoc by a veterinarian who had experience in exotics, who was part of the faculty at a veterinary school on the island here. But our company now has 2 full-time licensed veterinarians, which has been a key factor in us making great strides in improving animal welfare. Now, in turn, that has focused attention on animal welfare, greatly improving the customer experience. And it's upgraded the customer interactions to be safe for animals and for our guests. So, as I think back about all the things we did that were important, one of the things we did was we hugely ramped up the releases and repopulation into the wild of these captive bred green sea turtles. And we created important new ways and new venues even for those releases to be done at various life stages of the turtles. Thereby, we really further increased our impact in the environmental factors, the E factors of ESG. But as you can see on the screen now, we developed these new and innovative release methods that now take place from egg stage, from hatchling stage, and also from juvenile stage, anywhere from 1 to 3 years old. We call them head started turtles. And also we greatly increased the number of releases. Eventually we were achieving over 1,300 turtles per year being released. And also for the first time, we released turtles in our two sister islands, Cayman and Little Cayman, in addition to the release programs that have been going on for many years in Grand Cayman. Scientists have discovered that marine turtles are what we call keystone species for the marine environment. What that means is that these are species which perform environmental services which are vital for the survival of many other species. Of course, that has implications for the environment and so on that I wish I had all the time to get into those aspects, but I know we need to keep it moving, Kasha.
Thank you. It's a very interesting work, I must say. And we have one of our viewers who's also appreciating the work, and he's doing something similar in Orisha, Mr. Mukesh Sain, if you can check.
Yes, I see it, and I'm delighted to hear that. It is very, very important that we replicate the success of what we have been able to do here in as many places because the breeding of turtles in captivity or the rearing of turtles in captivity, which if you already have enough, if you have an adequate viable stock, even of hatchlings that are being hatched in the wild, even if you don't want to do breeding, at least take some of those and grow them up to 1 year old or older because they have a much better chance of survival in the wild. And I'm delighted to hear that in Odisha you have created a huge turtle breeding center there, the Ganjam. And I'm delighted to hear that this cause is being taken up because we know it works. And if I'll have time later on, hopefully we will, to talk about the immense success that's been proven by the numbers here of the number of turtles in the wild. Because of this program we have of breeding turtles and then releasing turtles as you saw on those various turtle release methods. It works. Yeah.
So it's very interesting to learn about the work that you have been doing. I understand that we have paucity of time, so I would I would request you to share your views on what are the topics that businesses should learn in order to become responsible business leaders. We are a dedicated institute for research, development, training, and project advisory for CSR, sustainability, ESG, and to become a responsible business leader. So, what kind of subjects do you see and the lacuna that you see in the present businesses that could be bridged to make them to make their journey towards responsible business leadership?
Well, Harsha, I would say, if I may, let me refer to your entity, IICSR. You're dedicated to both R&D as well as training, as well as advisory work in building responsible business leaders, in living up to your name. It is vital to enable your students and followers to better understand something else that we really haven't talked about in depth, but I'd like to mention that it's important we don't lose sight of. And that is the proper role and the proper interpretation of profits and fiscal responsibility in ensuring sustainability. They really go hand in hand. Right now, there's a lot of attention on ESG factors, on sustainable development goals, which I don't know if we'll have time to talk about, but these are very important things for us to be very cognizant of. And I'm pleased to see that they're top of mind, both ESG and the SDGs. In doing that, though, we cannot ignore really what's of vital importance of good financial stewardship and of fulfilling our fiduciary duties in the sustainability of our endeavors. Our fiduciary duties, meaning our duties of trust to be acting in the best interest of the company to keep it sustainable. And ESG, each of those three pillars are vital to that. However, fiscal responsibility, financial responsibility, delivering results, we cannot ignore that as well. So I would say that in our zeal for addressing ESG and SDGs, we mustn't lose sight of that. And whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, we have responsibilities for prudent use of the resources we have and for producing the results that fulfill our mission. And if I may go on a little bit, Harsha, it's incumbent on all of us as well to be lifetime learners. Those of you who are connected into this discussion today, you've demonstrated that you already know that because you've tuned into this resource that IICSR provides to assist you in your journey of continuous learning. Keep it up. Continue to remind yourselves that those with whom you have good discussions, remind yourselves and remind them, although we're individuals, we're all connected. It's individual decisions and influence that collectively become eventually local and national policies and go on to become international movements. That begins with individuals and then groups of individuals. So don't underestimate your power to change yourself and to change our world. One of the companies I mentioned is Barefoot Charters, and we have a slide. I'll look for that really quickly because I think that might be quite appropriate actually to share right now. Yeah, there you go. That's taken from our website, and it talks about the barefoot ethos, right? But being barefoot isn't really primarily about what you have on your feet. It's about what you have in your heart. It's about how you live, how you sustain your authenticity, how you are thoughtful, how you're deliberate, and how you mindfully use and how you sustain the environment where you live and move and have your being, and how you sustain the people you care about without destroying the environment. So you see that ethos, live barefoot.
Yes, indeed, and it's very well said. And uh, I'm sure the implementation of these ethos is also.
Sorry, Harsha, I'm not hearing you right now. I don't know if others in the group are having any problems with it. I can't hear anything from you now.
And today,
Now I can hear you again. Sorry. Yeah. But no,
yeah,
sorry. Yeah, I wasn't hearing
hello.
you, Harsha.
Uh, no, it's very interesting to see the work that Barefoot Ethos has been doing, and I'm sure there would be a lot to learn from the implementation perspective also for all of us. And what could be the lessons derived from this, and what are your learnings in this? What are the key achievements of this particular initiative? Would be great to learn more uh, on that.
Yes, it's a new company that my youngest son and I worked on creating, and he's operating it. And it's focused on small groups of people who are interested in an experience on the water in either the North Sound or on the west side of Cayman. And in so doing, able to bring them in touch with the beautiful environment of Cayman's waters and beaches and reefs and the creatures that inhabit them. And to the extent that you have an opportunity to enable people to experience these things, you also have an opportunity to talk to them about the value of these things. And whether it is at the Turtle Center, or it is at Cayman Crystal Gales, or it is on Cayman Safari, or it is on a Barefoot Charter, these are opportunities to do something really important. That it was a phrase that was coined back in the day by Jacques Cousteau, who, as you know, is a famous ocean explorer and a spokesperson for the marine environment. So I'm going to paraphrase something. It's exactly how he said it, I've amplified it a little bit. Is that people protect what they love, and people will love things that they can experience and understand, and people will understand what they experience if you teach them. So it's important to enable these experiences, and then it's important to inform these experiences. And in all of these companies, what we aim to do is to enable the experience. We get them to fall in love with the environment, with whether it's with turtles or it's with the caves and the unique geology and the creatures that inhabit the caves, the bats and so on. Whether it is with all of the environment on the land in a Cayman safari, whether it's environment in the sea and the creatures that inhabit the sea. If we get people to experience those things and fall in love with them, and then we tell them, okay, here's what you can do to help protect it. And it's something, hopefully, there's a lesson in that for all of us that as we go through our life, whether it's at work or whether it's in moments of leisure, when we experience things that we enjoy, give a thought to, okay, how can we continue to sustain it? How can we make this truly sustainable? We all have a part to play. We're all connected. And the things we do have implications for these things that we touch or see or enjoy as to how sustainable they are for the future. So all of these things are connected, you know.
That sounds great, Timothy. It's been wonderful having you with us. Any final message for all our viewers on biodiversity and what is the CEO's perspective on sustainability and its execution strategy?
But thank
Any
you. I hope
final
it's been
message
helpful.
for, yeah.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, of course, huge thanks to you, Harsha, for inviting me into this discussion. And we've had good discussions even before today, which has been really helpful in framing what I thought would be, I hope, helpful comments that come from a perspective of an engineer who became a CEO. And I will tell you, there are people who are eminent experts in sustainability matters, in policy development, and so on. So you had some of those people. I'm sure you'll have more of them in your LIGC sessions. So I hope that what I was able to do today was to give a practical, experienced viewpoint on how these things play out in real situations, in real companies doing real things, whether it's in conservation work with turtles or whether it's with introducing tourists to the environment. Hopefully to inspire that no matter where you are, what job you do, or how you spend your leisure time, you too can make a difference.
Thank you so very much. That's very well said, and it's a huge message for all of us. I really appreciate the time given and the wisdom shared. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harsha, and thank you to everyone who participated today.